if somebody said to me, if you leave where you're working, and in 10 years you'll have been credited in 250 products on drive-through, you'll have won 2 gold Ennies, you'll be working for all these people in the OSR that, you know, at the time they were like, you know, gods. I wouldn't have believed you, I don't think.
Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on about old school games. Today I sit down with Glynn from Monkeyblood Design, best known for the creation of the Midderlands setting, an amazing OSR setting. We're going to talk about layout design, monster design, some local folklore, so much more. So without any more preamble, let's get on with the show. And as always, I hope you can sit back, listen, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by a 2-time Ennie Gold Award winner, a cartographer, a designer, a YouTube person now, a layout master, a whole bunch of titles. He's created an amazing setting. Glynn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks ever so much for having me on. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So let's go through a couple of those titles that you've got. So cartographer and designer and layout master. A lot of these are titles that would take years and years and years of crafting and experience. Is this what you had started off doing, or was this a hobby that you fell into now as your full-time thing?
Yeah. So basically, when I was at school, I was kind of more interested in creative stuff, loved drawing, and kind of excelled at technical drawing. So that was really what I wanted to get involved in. So I wanted to be a draftsman and you know, kind of pursue that sort of thing. I was also interested in sign writing at one point as well, but it was kind of a dying art, because right when I was interested in looking into it, there was a guy that lived over the road from me, and he used to paint, you know, hand paint signs for shops and things. So it was a real craft, and I went over to see him. I was only like 16, wet behind the ears, and yeah, he kind of piqued my interest in it. But I think by that time it was slowly dying off with the advent of computers and that kind of stuff, and now nobody really paints signs by hand, hardly anybody in that. But it ended up that I started doing, I worked for a company and they wanted a draftsman. So I kind of started, and you know, that was what I really enjoyed doing. And that role sort of evolved from being a trainee draftsman on the old drafting machines to like becoming a project engineer, and then, you know, multiple roles I had in that company, project manager. So I kind of, the whole kind of project life cycle, you know, I used to do quotes as well, all those kinds of things. So I've had a very good grounding on a lot of different tasks in business, if you like, in an engineering setting. So yeah, I worked for that company for just under 30 years. So it was a very long time. And I still do little bits and bobs for them now, actually, as a freelance. But they were a security company. So they did, started off doing cell doors and cell benches for police stations and things like that. And it kind of evolved into automatic gates and CCTV and all that kind of thing. So the business grew a lot. The client base got much more important, really, and high profile. And it kind of, the job sort of evolved into something that wasn't really me, because I'm more of a creative. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that. So in the end, it was just, it all got a bit too much, and I just thought I need to be doing something else. So kind of towards the end of that, I mean, I've always kind of gamed and been into that sort of stuff. So I kind of decided I was writing my own thing. I'd got into Google Plus. I don't know whether you ever remember.
Yep.
G Plus. I mean, we're talking back in about 2014, something like that. And yeah, it was just such a great kind of community. It was actually a really good social platform, much better than Facebook and Twitter and all that. But there were loads of creatives on there, which I'd never kind of really found anywhere that was like that before. And yeah, so I was just kind of posting pictures of miniatures that I painted and started to put a few maps that I was drawing. And then somebody said, "Oh, that's good. Why don't you draw some maps for my book that I'm writing?" I was like, "What? Oh, yeah, I'll have some of that." So yeah, I got involved in doing a few commissions, and it kind of snowballed on from there, really, and a path kind of opened up for me to kind of turn it into something more, more of a business opportunity, and ultimately led me out of the security industry and doing this full time. So that was it's getting on for 10 years since I started on Google Plus.
It sounds like a lot of the experiences that you would have gotten out of that probably help you a lot now in kind of the project management and you've done an upteen amount of Kickstarters, which I'm sure we'll chat about here afterwards.
Yeah,
but the thing I would say, at least from my perspective, looking in, that you're most famous for, what I've first ever heard of you about would be the Midderlands setting.
Yes.
And there's something really gripping about it, and I'm not sure if it's because it's, in a way, it almost feels like an alternative history. It feels like it's grounded enough in a pseudo reality that you can kind of fall into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening that somehow have not heard of it, I would assume almost everybody that listens to this podcast has. But if you haven't, it's a kind of a system agnostic setting, can be easily played with almost any setting or any system, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it was originally written for swords and wizardry, so but the setting parts of that, they are pretty much system agnostic. If you want to kind of encounter some of the creatures and stuff, then yeah, there's also a 5th edition version of that first book as well, which Frog God Games released, Necromancer Games.
And if you're a fan of the color green, I mean, it's all it's all over there.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of green going on.
When you sat down to do that, like I said, it kind of feels like it's almost like a pseudo alternate reality, alternate history. Obviously, it's from where you're from. You're kind of mapping your hometown and putting a mythology over it. Was it something? When I see people sit down to do settings, or if they're creating their own campaign world, there's some advice that goes out that I don't know if I personally agree with that advice, and I'm interested to hear your take. Where it's people always start with the map, and they're like, sit down and draw a map first, and then populate it. And I don't know if I agree with that or not, but you've done this. You've got a very successful one out there. Did you start with the map first, or did you start with the content?
So yeah, what the kind of, when I started, it started with artwork, but when I started drawing the artwork, this wasn't something that I planned to turn into a game setting. So on evenings, I go over to my girlfriend's house and she puts the TV on, and I get out a pad and I'll just start doodling, because I'm generally not interested in what's on the TV. So I started doodling like just weird creatures, the heads of weird creatures. And the more of them that I did, the more I thought it would be great if these actually lived in places around where I am.
Mhm.
I don't know whether you're familiar with the Spiderwick Chronicles,
Yep.
which is the Tony DiTerlizzi.
I bought a little book for my son. It's kind of like a bestiary of Spiderwick Chronicles. It's just a book that just goes over the characters that were in the film. And it's great. Now that you say that, I can kind of see the similarities between that and the bestiary in.
I think that was the seed in my mind as when I got to the point where I'd drawn a few, and I was thinking it'd be great if these existed, but around where I live, in all of the strange places that are actually from around here. Would it be good if it was kind of more medieval or Renaissance period or something like that, and then just put a fantasy twist on stuff and darken some bits up, and so that's really where it came from. But it was probably the map, or I was roughing out the area that I wanted to kind of contain all these creatures in. So yeah, it was the map after that, but it was the creatures that were the spark. That was where it came from, and then the rest of it just kind of just flowed out as the muse dictated.
So, and when you sit down to do the map, I mean, like I said, yours is kind of a map of your home area, so you had a good idea of what you're mapping just because you live there. But when people sit down to create a fantasy map for setting or for any sort of a reason, if they're going to use it in a game purpose, how I know some people get really, really anxious and painstakingly over the most minutia of details when it comes to the map. But in your mind, how important is things like it has to be super accurately on the distance between things and show all the terrain, or is it, it depends on what the version or what the map is used for? I think a navigation map that a sailor may have used way back when versus a map that somebody did to show all the towns in the county were probably very different in terms of their levels of accuracy.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, if you actually overlay the map onto Google Maps, like the things aren't exactly in the same places. They're pretty much where they are, but no, I kind of just I sort of freestyled some bits of it. The thing is, unless it's a historical book, you don't need to define everything. You don't need to kind of hem yourself in. It's something that you can just freestyle and not worry about too much. So yeah, the map was just just drew it as I drew it. Like I wasn't paying too much attention to kind of the detail of it,
because I guess in your case the map was meant to be a home for you to put the creative creatures that you've made and the stories.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you drop a hex overlay on top of it, that tells you how far everything is from each other. It didn't have to be this. This must be 10 miles. It doesn't matter. It could be 11, could be 15. It doesn't. That's like, well, I wasn't really bothered about that.
So, for those who don't know your area of the UK very well, what makes it different, or what makes it, besides the fact that you just happen to live in it, but what makes it interesting to allow you to bring in a sort of folklore that you have? Like, what is it that is about this part of the UK that speaks to you, other than, again, obviously you live there, so you're a little bit biased from that standpoint? But
I think if I lived anywhere in the UK, I could write a book that was basically very similar, just with whatever the influences of that region are. So the map, probably from where I live, if we're looking at the width of the map, I could probably drive for about an hour both ways. So it's like 2 hours drive across the map. It's not like tiny. It's there's a fair bit to explore. and it's kind of, that's the range at which I'm quite familiar with a lot of landmarks and places I've visited, tales of things in history. The further out that I get from here, the less of that I know, so I can't be kind of a bit authentic to the region. So like with the Gomans, which are like, that's the analog for the Romans, I think they went as far north as like Hadrian's Wall, up to Scotland.
Yeah.
And that they built lots of roads and military camps and trading posts and things like that. And that road, the main, it's called the A5 Watling Street. That actually appears in the Midlands setting. It's kind of an artery route. And the Gomans had to feature as somebody that came 2,000 years ago from Italica and invaded. So it's just picking up on historical things, landmarks. So there's where I used to work on the way in, there was like a ruined round tower thing on a hilltop, and I never knew what it was. And it turns out it was a ruined windmill.
Okay.
It was just the base of it as it had toppled down, and there was a wooden post sticking out the top with a cross beam on it. But I didn't know it was a windmill until I bought a book on how windmills were constructed for another project. So yeah, that features Bognot Windmill because it's in an area called Bognot Road. So yeah, it's just picking up things like that. What was that windmill used for? There's a cult there or something. Yeah. So yeah, good fun.
So as you've created all these different creatures and stories, is there what creatures are you kind of your pet favorites? So when I flipped through, there was a couple of things that I really liked. I liked how some of the goblins they were named almost based off their facial features, what have you. So if you're a GM and you're describing it without telling them which creature is there, as you're describing it, if they know it will click in. But I think my favorite one was probably the Noblin. I like the idea of of a little creature that doesn't really care about trying to defeat you, but it wants to steal everything you have and come in. But what's your
it's the Wart Goblin, and I don't think it appears in so there's actually 3 books. There's the Midlands Expanded, and the City of Great London. And there was a creature called the Mud Cow, and the Mud Cow was going to be in the first book, but I ran out of space and I needed to save some room in layout. So I took the Mud Cow out, and the Mud Cow made it into the second book in the Midlands Expanded. So the Wart Goblin and the Mud Cow to me are the iconic Midlands creatures. If you're wandering down a country lane, then there's going to be a mud cow in a field somewhere, So yeah, mud cows and Wart Goblins, love those guys.
When you're creating these characters, how do you balance the weird with reality? How do you keep from going so weird that you enter like Call of Cthulhu type area where things just don't really fit anymore? Like, how do you balance that?
The funny thing is, I don't try to balance it. I just do what comes out of my head, which I don't really want stuff to be gonzo. I like it to sort of be a bit of a halfway house between, it needs to be memorable. I think that's the thing. It's like I talk about game juice being something that is really important, which is kind of just having enough of something that it inspires. So if you've got creatures that kind of look quite funky, they don't need to be or gnashing fangs and stuff like that. They can be they just got to be interesting.
Right.
Game juice.
So just having something there that I guess sparks the person who's running the game to want to throw those out. When you run the game, do you if a party encounters creatures, are you referring to them as by name, or are you doing the whole description off of your drawing and letting them go out that way?
So things like walk goblins. The walk goblins are effectively they're kind of like accepted PCs. Like in some settings, you can play an orc PC.
Yeah.
But in mine, walk goblins are wandering around. They're not considered unusual in any way. And there's a lot of different playable. All of the creatures in the first book are playable as characters. So they're not particularly balanced, so they're not necessarily as much fun as playing something else. But the walk goblin, yeah, yeah, loads of time for the walk goblin. But kind of in answer to your question, like if it's something they've never come across before, then I'll give them some clues. They might know if because they've all read the book. But yeah, generally I'll say what it is because they'll have encountered it. It's a mud cow or it's a walk goblin, But if it's something that an intestinal hawk or something, then they're not going to have encountered that maybe, or they've heard about it in lore. So, I can give them some clues and they can make a judgment.
So the Midderlands comes out and it's almost immediately a huge success. Really, I mean, it funded right away. Everybody who like I said, I'd be shocked if there's too many people that listen to this podcast who haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
And as you said, you've managed to follow up with a couple other books, and I don't even know how many zines are out for the Midderlands right now.
I've been working on Midderlands 8 for about 2 years, so it's definitely not on a regular release cycle.
Well, what has been was it a surprise to you at all, or did you kind of feel like you had something at the get-go, and what's been the general feedback to you? Like, has it been obviously positive, but has there been people coming back being like, "Thank you, this is exactly what we needed," or like how's
yeah, I think people that enjoy it will tell you, and yeah, it's been. I mean, it's when was the Kickstarter? It was about 2015, I think, the Kickstarter maybe. 2014, 2015. Like, it's getting on for. It must be near a 10-year anniversary edition.
Combine all 3 books into one mega.
Yeah, and I've thought about that. So I've got an issue coming up, which is the first book is about to run out of print copies. There are about 20 copies left. So at the moment, if I want to get another, say, 500 copy print run, I mean, it's probably £6,000 or something like that. So I'd have to find £6,000 worth of outlay to get that reprinted. And I haven't, unless I raise it through Kickstarter, I haven't got £6,000 to get it reprinted. So I'd have to offer an updated and expanded version, I think, to make it justifiable, because people won't want to fund the same book again. A second edition or a 10th anniversary edition might be something to consider. But I've thought about making it print on demand, which I'm sort of not a fan of print on demand, and I sort of am. the standard color versions I don't think are up to much. The premium color versions, this is on drive-through, are much better print quality, but much more expensive. So I think even if I offered it through drive-through as a print-on-demand version, it would probably be more money than it costs now, because it's £30, £30 for the book, and it's been £30 for nearly 9 years. So actually, it's really good value for money now.
Right.
But yeah, it will almost, when those 20 run out, it will almost certainly go up in price at some point. So if you haven't got it and you want to pick up, I think it's the second printing, then yeah, you're going to need to do that quick before I figure out what I'm going to do about it.
I'm just thinking now of how we can force your hand here a little bit and just get everybody to buy these last 20 copies.
Yeah, I'm stuck then. I'll have to do it.
As you've been going through though, and you mentioned laying out, like, you know, some of the struggles with laying out the first book and have to move some of the content to a separate one because you didn't have enough room, and if you were to take on setting up a 10-year anniversary, you're gonna have to jump back into layout and everything. But that's something that you've done on the YouTube channel as well, is try to help people that are creating zines or creating things and doing layouts. And I love the fact that you use a software that I like to use too, Affinity Design. I think the Affinity product line is fantastic alternative for Adobe software, just because of the fact that you actually own it. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about like how you view layout? Because that seems to be, in some ways, that seems to be like a definitive selling point for some people at this point. Like, I think part of the reason that like the most popular OSR going right now would be Old School Essentials.
Yeah.
And a large part of its success, outside of it having the best rule set, in my opinion, is being BX. But it's because of its layout, because of how easy it is to reference, and that sort of layout that they've done has been hailed as, like, you know, everybody shall do this. I don't think that should be the case, but layout is important. So how do you view layout, and how do you suggest other people try to take it on to make things clear?
Yeah, well, it's very specific to the book, and like if I'm doing it for a client, it depends what they kind of expect. Some clients have a very, like, they don't want a book that is laid out like OSE. They want a book that's like a conventional, like a Pathfinder book, where it's sort of crammed full of, you know, no space is spare. So I do all of my layout, generally speaking, in Adobe InDesign. But I didn't. I started with Serif Page Plus, which was the precursor to Affinity Publisher. And that's... my hand was forced, actually, to learn Adobe InDesign, because when I was doing the Midderlands 5th edition version for Necromancer Games, they said, we want the layout redone, US letter size, but it needs to be done in Adobe InDesign so that, you know, we've got the files and stuff. I'm like, okay, I need to learn it then. So I kind of spent 2 weeks watching every single tutorial I could clap my eyes on, and then basically I did the 5th edition version in Adobe InDesign as the first layout project in Adobe InDesign. And then I thought, this does some things better than Page Plus and Affinity. So I kind of adopted that then as the standard for doing layout. But I keep Affinity because Affinity's still very good. I have a lot of clients as well that do layout in Affinity products. So sometimes they send me the files and ask me to kind of go through them and prepare print files for drive-through or Amazon or Lulu, just to make sure they've got all the right settings and color profiles and bleeds correct and all that sort of stuff. So I know how to use them both. But yeah, I think if you're getting into it and you want to do that sort of stuff yourself, Adobe InDesign has got a little bit of a steeper curve, I think, than Affinity Publisher. Affinity Publisher's pretty good. It's got a reasonably straightforward GUI, yeah, but a lot of features you can lay out a book in either, and I couldn't tell you. Well, I could, but I just by looking, I can't tell you whether it's done in InDesign or Affinity Publisher just by looking at the PDF.
Is there a point where if you're a small zine creator, or you're doing a couple of small projects, what do you say is a tipping point of when one should move from one product to the other? Is there a certain type of layout that you're doing, or is there a certain type of publisher you're working with? I mean, obviously, if the publisher says, "Hey, we only accept this file type," then you're stuck. But is there kind of a point where you think there's like a graduation point where, okay, you've reached this point, you should probably start learning the other tool?
So, if I was doing a book more than 200 pages, probably, what I tend to do in InDesign, you basically create a book file, and then inside that book file you can add chapter files or InDesign documents. So you can have multiple InDesign documents
nested inside
within a book. Yeah, and what happens is, depending on how you've got those organized in the book, the pagination and the headers and the page numbering all follows on. And if you do an index, you can index and build tables of contents for all of the files within that book. So it's very good doing like I've just done 3 500-page layouts. So a book that's 500 pages, you don't want one InDesign file or one Affinity Publisher file with 500 pages in. That's just yeah. So I'd just break that down into separate chapter files. Affinity Publisher, it might now, because it's version 2, isn't it? So I think it can support books now. It would seem odd that they haven't addressed that. One of the reasons that I stopped using it as well is because when you were exporting files, if you'd built a table of contents and you exported the file into a PDF, it didn't retain the heading, the bookmarks in the PDF file based on the headings. So you couldn't do it. Really? You had to do them manually. They've fixed that now. So, but it was one reason that I'm like, I can't move to Publisher, because there's no way I'm doing all that manually. So yeah, I've just opened up Affinity Publisher. I was having a quick look, see if, so you can do a new book. So yeah, they've obviously fixed some of that now. So yeah, maybe you could do a multi-volume set in Affinity Publisher. I probably wouldn't try, because I'll come up against something that I can't do that is a deal breaker.
Yeah, there in the world of especially in the tabletop world and OSR, there seems to be a move with some books, not all of them, but there's a move to make them much more artistic in terms of how they're laid out. So there's a zine that I love. I buy every single one that comes out, the Knock zines.
Yes.
They're fantastically well laid out, and they have an artistic flair to each page or what have you. And for some reason that I love, but then I look at a game like Morkborg, and for me that's almost an immediate turnoff of how that game is laid out. And I don't have a reason why in my brain.
Yeah, it's strange, because I see those as very similar in approach, because
yeah, and I can see that. I don't know why one I go no thanks, and the other one I'm like yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's the content, maybe it's because with Knock it's something I'm willing to sit back and just to read. I'm not trying to reference anything. I'm not trying to learn a game from it. And Morkborg, I approach it differently because I'm thinking of it. I'm coming to it thinking I'm expecting a document I'm going to learn from.
Yeah. I think Morkborg is definitely more kind of punk metal aesthetic, whereas that isn't the case with Knock magazine. It's
Knock definitely has a more of a whimsical feel to it.
Yes.
in some ways, but I don't mind the metal aesthetic. That would normally not be an issue for me. But yeah, I wish I could articulate better of why one jumps in but one doesn't. But I've seen that same sentiment come around of different games, and people rail against it a little bit of like, hey, I can see that that's visually stunning, but it doesn't work for me to read it. When you're laying out stuff, how much of is accessibility and actually being able to consume the content versus the artistic flair of it?
For my own books, I like it relatively simple. I like to be able to kind of read it. I'm not. I don't want to have to decipher the text content out of the imagery. But so some if it's a rule book ideally doesn't need all of that, because the purpose of the rule book is like a technical manual. Its job is to explain the rules to you so you can play the game. But you want to give some tone and some setting and a vibe to the game. So that the artwork and kind of the headings and the text fonts play a part in that. But yeah, I sort of prefer mine quite straightforward. The book that I've always thought was like the piece de resistance for layout, and a book that I absolutely loved, still do, is the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting book. I don't know whether you've ever seen that, but it just hit all the right spots for me in terms of how books should be laid out, and just a book I just kept wanting to pick up and flick through and read bits. And so it doesn't need to be yellow and I've had the life spot UV'd and foiled out of it. It doesn't need that. It's just got to be usable, really, and a nice a book that draws your eyes into it to read. And some people's version of what looks cool is different to other people's. So, like Morkborg is not your version of a cool looking book, but things like Not 4 or something else are. So
yeah, is there a type of layout that maybe isn't traditionally thought of in terms of a gaming scene that you think would work well in it? I was chatting with somebody, and I apologize if that person's listening because I completely forget their name at the moment, but they were talking about how for book layout, something that they had seen that really kind of drew them in. They were kind of studying that style is cookbooks, and they're looking at cookbooks and how they were laid out.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah.
And how they could bring that into a tabletop setting, and it was kind of like, oh wow, I never even considered that. But is there other types of layouts that are like a style that's generally linked to something like a cookbook has a general style, or an older classical magazine, or hell, even the phone book has a particular type of style that it's done that you think would translate well over? Or if you were going to try to steal from one to make something new?
I mean, I think of Knock 4 as a magazine style. Like every spread's kind of different, and so yeah, I mean, the cookbook thing's a good point, because, but I think it only lends itself to certain things. So I would say if you're doing something whereby you've got spreads and there's a map and information about what's in that map, and then you open the page up and there's another spread, that's got a very cookbook formula to the layout, because there's things that, the recipe is maybe the list of the creatures that are in here, and you've got like a map on one page which is your spaghetti bolognese with egg on the top or whatever. So yeah, I can see how that works for some things, but not necessarily. Like, I don't think it would make a very good rule book. Be good for the section on classes. So you have a page dedicated to your class, and then all of your kind of abilities and things are bullet pointed like in a cookbook. But that kind of already exists, really. If you look at some books, you open up the class section and it's kind of cookbook, really. Yep. So I think that exists because it's a good way to present certain information. And that's ultimately what it's about. You're trying to make it so that, ideally, if you can design on spreads or single pages, so that, every class is one page or every class is a spread, then, it just makes it easier to parse and take the information out.
Right. Yeah, there's a few books that I really enjoy. There's one, looking over here, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the Neverland or Oz settings that Adam Kolb has put out.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen them. I know of them, but I've never had my hands on one.
The Neverland one in particular is incredibly well laid out in terms of how he handles just little things, like he's got a hex map and he will show you everything that's going on in the hex map, and then there's little things like at the bottom of the page he'll show you the surrounding hexes, and each one of those is basically the page number that hex is on. There's just little tiny layout things like that. Yeah. Really neat. But so with some of these larger settings, Midderlands and what have you, you can game in there forever. Like you could spend your entire gaming time sitting in there. But for somebody who wants something a little bit shorter, we're coming into the summer where there's going to be more conventions and everything else. And if somebody wants to do one shots, I noticed that you've got OSR shorts. Can you tell me a little bit about OSR shorts and what those are all about?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to create some very short form. So just rewind myself. Sometimes I'm very, very busy, and sometimes I'm like, oh right, I've got some time to work on my own projects. So like Midland stuff, but I'm kind of at the whim of the freelance work, really, and I use my own projects to fill time, because I know at some point that time will get paid for when I release a product, and so I don't waste much time. So I've totally forgot what I was where I was going with this. What was the question again?
We were talking about the OSR shorts, and you were trying how you were able to insert those in between projects, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, exactly that. Yeah, that was it. So sometimes I know that I've got a day spare while I'm waiting for some information, and I'm like, right, I can't bury myself in project X because I need like a week, because once you get into it, so I was thinking I could do with creating some very short form 1 or 2 page pieces of content that people can download cheap, and run things like a one shot or an evening session, but also not just that. They could be a magic item or two. You know, anything that's just short form content that I can create relatively quickly. And I mean, I must have drawn like thousands of maps. So I've got lots of maps that I've already drawn that I can just put in and populate up and create some content. So yeah, that originated basically because trying to fill my time with small things. So yeah, I've got one that's due out imminently, really. But I need to. I've been that busy doing layout and cartography projects that I haven't got back onto creating as many as I'd like. But I think there's probably about 10, something like that, out at the moment.
How difficult is it to do that context shift when if you're spinning a lot of plates and you've got all these different projects going? You're working on a fantasy world or a fantasy product that has a very specific vibe over here, and then there's 6 other projects that may be dramatically different. How difficult it is to mentally switch between that, and is that something that, like, your previous experience with project management would have you help out a lot, being able to time that out, or is that just?
I mean, it must be
just adapted over time.
Yeah, it must be the previous experience. I mean, literally, you'd get an email when in the job that I used to work in. I'd have an email. I'd go in the morning, think, right, this is what I'm going to do today. 30 minutes in, there's an email that totally changes your day. So you've just got to shift and deal with whatever's going on, and you've got to get this thing done by the end of the day. But lunchtime, somebody comes in and they need this by the end of the day. It's just like it. So I think my brain's kind of wired to deal with that, but it doesn't feel like it did when you're doing it for yourself. And if it's something you're really enjoying doing, it's pretty easy to kind of, if you can at least finish one job and then move on to the next. So I could be doing. So today's an example. I started with a 3D mock-up of some products for somebody. So built some models in Google SketchUp, used the book covers and things as textures to build a model with a slipcase, and put that on a table that I'd modeled, and did some renders. So that was last night and this morning. And then somebody needed me to do some print-on-demand assistance in Affinity Publisher, which I did. And then prior to talking to you and after talking to you, I'm doing some cartography for somebody. So kind of like 3 totally different disciplines in a day. And yeah, I enjoy doing all of them. So I don't feel like, I'm like, oh yeah, 3D model, love building 3D models. Oh yeah, I love Affinity Publisher. Oh, I love drawing maps. It's like, yeah, it's brilliant. Get paid for this.
It's interesting because you hear some people say, don't make your hobby your job, because it doesn't. If you do, then it stops being as much joy to you or what have you. But it sounds like you're kind of the exception to that, where it's like, I took my hobby, made it a job, and I could be wrong. Maybe I'm projecting, but it sounds like you're pretty satisfied with how things are going with it. That it's going well, and
I'm ecstatic. Like, I couldn't be happier. From I was very unhappy doing what I was doing. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I'd kind of wore myself out. I think I'd burnt out, and like every day doing this is different. And if I'm not doing something for somebody else, I'm doing something for me. And the bills get paid every month, and they have done ever since I left. So, I mean, there's been times when the web store's gone quiet, so I'm not selling much on the web store. And I haven't got any commission work coming up. So I don't worry about it. I just move on to my stuff, which obviously isn't paying the bills, but it will at some point. And then every time I think, oh, it's gone a bit quiet, like then all of a sudden it just goes absolutely mental, and I'm buried in work. I'm booked now until middle of July. So it's the industry's certainly alive, and more so probably for me than it it has been in any time since I moved into full time.
All right, a couple of quick rapid questions for you then, in terms of advice questions. So, say somebody who's trying to do their own thing for the first time. One, what would be your number one advice for somebody who they're trying to do what you did? They want to make a setting based around where they live. They know that area really well. What's something that they should keep in mind, or make their focus, or something that maybe they should not make their focus? Either something that will help them, or something they should avoid to help have some success in a hometown setting, so to speak.
Right. Okay. I mean, if we're talking specifically about setting things, write and create for what you enjoy. Don't try and make it something. Don't try and make it something that somebody else will you think somebody else will enjoy, because it's much harder to create when you're kind of not fully invested in it. Like if you're doing something writing for somebody else, I mean, you can still enjoy it, but just write what you're enthusiastic about writing. Just have a passion for it, and everything else will follow that. If you're passionate about whatever you're doing, other people will get passionate about it because they see your passion in it.
Yeah, the enthusiasm will become infectious, and
yeah.
So once they've got a product, and they've got it done, what would you say is important to make sure you have a successful Kickstarter, and something you should avoid to not have your Kickstarter go the way that many Kickstarters have in the past? Because you've done several of these now. So what?
Yeah, I think I've done 13.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So I think everybody will tell you, make sure you've pretty much got everything done. If you're writing yourself, just make sure you've pretty much written it, because when the Kickstarter money comes through, if you haven't really started, or you've just done the first chapter and you've got another 9 to write, that puts the pressure on you, and it feels like a real uphill battle, because you're no longer doing it for you. You're doing it to make sure the backers get what they wanted. So I would say do it for you from the start, and then then because you might want money for artists and stuff, and that's fine. But if you can pay for any art before you start, so that you've got things to show and stuff like that, then do that. The more of it that's done before you launch, the better.
And so somebody has a great idea. They've come up with this setting or this product of what have you that they think people will be interested in. They get it 95 or all the way complete in terms of the content. They get it up on Kickstarter, and it's went well for them. Now comes time to layout. If they're approaching somebody like yourself or any other person for layout, what sort of things do they need to keep in mind? That if a client's coming to you, what distinguishes a good client from a bad client in terms of, okay, this person has their ducks in a row, or this person has no clue and I have to handhold them the whole way through it? Like what distinguishes one from the other?
It's funny because I don't tend to differentiate clients really on that level. I mean, some will come to me and they know exactly what they want in terms of layout. I want 2 column. I don't want paragraphs breaking across spreads. I don't want paragraphs breaking across columns. That adds lots of extra complications into layout. But some people will know exactly what they want. Others, they will have never run a Kickstarter before, and they will have never commissioned artwork before. And I have both of those as clients right now, and I'll help either out to get what they need. If they need art direction, they've never commissioned an artist. They're not quite sure what information to give them. I might write a specification and say, give this to your artists, because that will tell them what they need to know. And then, have a discussion with them about what the content of that is. So kind of I'll tend to support them through wherever they are on their journey as a publisher. And people tend to be at different stages in that. So yeah, whatever people need to make their dream, happen. Some people it's a dream, some people it's the next product in the line, but yeah, just help them out. It doesn't matter to me whether they're veterans or total noobs. I'll help them out.
What's the feeling like, or if you can remember, what was the feeling like when you get the first proof back from a printer of a book that's got your name on the cover of it? What's that experience kind of like for somebody the first time they get a hold of it?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit surreal, because there's a lot of effort to get. If it's a very small 8-page publication, it might seem like a lot of effort. But my first foray into Kickstarter and do my own project was a 224-page hardcover book with spot UV and so. And I think some people that have never project managed and done all that would be frightened by that. And I know that's the case, because people have told me, how on earth did you grow a pair to go and try and do that? It's just risk management, basically. Make sure you try and understand all of the risks involved, and mitigate them as best you can. The classic one, shipping. I think I charged shipping on the very first Kickstarter as part of the pledges, and the problem is, when you kickstart it, postage rates can change between that point and when you've finally got some books printed months down the line. If all the postage rates have gone up, you've got 1,000 backers and the post just gone up by £2 a parcel. That's £2,000 you just lost.
Yeah,
it's really easy to balls that up and lose all the profit on the Kickstarter. But it was something that I was kind of aware of, yeah, it worked out. And then I came up with some different strategies for mitigating that risk better later, which is tell people the approximate shipping cost, but it will be charged based on the rates through the web store when we come time to ship. And that meant that people were paying what the actual shipping cost was at the time, rather than paying it in advance and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's just a few things improved along the way, really. But yeah, just shipping. Oh, yeah, you can get really stuck on shipping.
Yeah, you really saw that with a lot of Kickstarters around the pandemic era, whenever the shipping just went absolutely bananas. And I'm not sure if it's ever actually been resolved. I live in Canada, so shipping here is always a pain in the butt, no matter what.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's very much like folks that live in Australia, how much of a pain in the butt shipping is for them. I hear You know, you see, I look south of the border and you see people shipping willy-nilly within the US, and it's a non-issue for them. It's like, yeah, as soon as you cross this imaginary line, though, that price goes up like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. I mean, it's expensive for me to ship to the States now. I mean, it was always reasonably expensive, but I think when Trump became president, he did something with the postal service, so incoming mail got charged loads of extra tax or something, and that got passed on in the UK to have to pay it. Which so if you want to blame President Trump for something, it's why it's so expensive to get books from the UK, because he made us pay loads of extra tax here.
So before we sat down, we had been chatting a little bit, and you had mentioned that you've gone on a few different podcasts before. I've listened to some of them. Some of my favorites, like you've been on with 10 Car a bunch. You've been with Old Man Grognard. He ran ads for you forever. Big fan of both those gentlemen. But in all these different conversations with people that, you know, I'm assuming most people ask you to come on and talk about Midderlands and that particular work because it's what everybody knows.
Yeah.
But as you're sitting down for these conversations, is there something that you've created, or just something about yourself or a hobby that you've had that you're like, man, I wish somebody would ask me about this because I could go on for hours about this topic that nobody ever asks me about? Is there something of you that you know we should be putting out there that people just don't know about because they focus on Midderlands?
I do a lot of work in projects for other people, for other publishers. And people wouldn't necessarily associate me with some of those things. They'd be like, did you? Oh, well, I didn't know that. So yeah. So Modiphius, if you've heard of Modiphius, their Acton Cthulhu line. I've done a lot of maps for that. So there's a project coming out for Modiphius, the D-Day, big hardback book. So I did all of the maps inside there, and a lot of the other hardbacks that have come out recently. I did some maps for their upcoming Cohors Cthulhu. Yeah, I've done some projects for Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So there's some stuff coming up. Ezra Clavery's A True Relation of the Great Virginia Disastrum 1633 that's coming out from Lamentations, and it's a 3-volume set, cloth books with foil in a slip case with poster maps, character sheets, expedition sheets. It's going to be stunning, and that I believe is currently at the printer. So that's coming up. I've done a lot of layout stuff for James Rudgy, cartography for OSE. So I did one of the Dolmenwood maps,
really?
which is in the Dolmenwood campaign book, and some of the new adventures that are coming out for Dolmenwood, like Fungus Came to Blackswell, Imelda's Song. And
is that? Do you have the Fungus came to Blackswell? Is that they've been saying that's coming out forever? I asked Norman about it. It had to have been a year and a half ago. I want that adventure out because the original is so cool. I love the concept of it.
Yeah. I've done the maps for that.
Yeah.
So it's coming. It's coming.
Good. I love that adventure. I've basically homebrewed it, my own version of it. But yeah, because the original got pulled down once they struck the deal with Necrotic Gnome, so you can't get the original version of that adventure anymore. But I can't wait to see what that looks like when it comes out in their publishers.
Yeah, well, it'll be great. I mean, the Dolmenwood books are looking fantastic. Years and years ago, when I was starting Midlands stuff, me and Gavin were chatting, and I wanted to put Dolmenwood in the Midderlands setting somewhere. So if you look in the Midderlands expanded, the island of Emerald and Dolmenwood is effectively Ireland, because it was the only place that I'd got left that was big enough to contain a forest that big. So yeah, Gavin let me kindly use those places for the map, and I basically, there's an entry in Emerald that says, refer to Dolmenwood, set it by a necrotic gnome. I caught up with Gavin about that recently as well, because I said, now this is now your Dolmenwood's the big time. Are you okay with me still having these terms in the book? He said, yeah, that's fine. We agreed that years and years ago. It's cool. I'm like, I don't have to go through the pain of having to take all that out.
Yeah, when I spoke with him last, I had asked him about the whole, having a licensing. At that point, it was more about OSE, more so than Dolmenwood, but he seemed to have a fairly clear and easy view of licensing. Just don't make it sound like you're that you made it, the product, and as long as you're doing that, and it's not something that I'm terribly against, we're all good. So it was very, very much a I think the last time I spoke to him was around the time of the OGL stuff, so it was kind of why that was being brought up. But
I think most, certainly in the OSR, most creators
just want credit.
Yeah, they kind of understand that, their products only can exist because of the OGL and stuff that they're taking from other people anyway. So there's kind of an acceptance that, yeah, of course you can use bits and bobs, just don't take the P. And I think most people are relatively okay with that, I mean, if you've totally created a rule system from scratch and it's your own thing, that's a bit different. But yeah, the OGL stuff. Yeah, like if somebody emailed me and said, I want to write something, an adventure for my own commercial stuff, and I'd really like to make some references to the Midlands stuff in it. Yeah, I'll be fine with that. Email me first, though. Don't just totally copy and paste everything out of the Midlands book and sell it as your own. I'll have a problem with that.
Well, so if people want to get in touch with you, or they want to buy up this last 20 copies of the Midderlands and add another project to your never-ending list of projects, where do they find you, and where do they find the stuff that you've worked on? And
monkeyblooddesign.co.uk, all one word, Monkeyblood. Monkeyblood Design is kind of all one word. If you go there, /store will take you to the shop, and you can see all the things that I've got for sale there. If you go to drive-through as well, search for Monkeyblood, pretty much you will see the digital stuff that's for sale there in the print on demand. I think if you search for Glynn Seal, you'll see all of the products that I've been credited in. I think there's something like 250 plus products on drive-through that I've got a credit in there for me somewhere, which is bonkers to think about. Yeah, can't believe how much work I've done. And in 10 years, you'll have
you've had 10 years where this is the primary focus, right? So that's a success story. If you're getting
all these,
if you've got so much stuff, like, I can't believe I managed to get so much stuff done. That's impressive.
Gods. I wouldn't have believed you, I don't think.
And I mean, for almost anybody, that would be a legacy where you're like, tip your cap. That's an awesome legacy, but you've still got more stuff coming out. You're still plugging away and enjoying it and loving it. So I can't wait to see the next bunch of stuff that you come out with. And yeah, let's buy up those last 20. So he's forced to do a 10-year remake and see what sort of crazy stuff we can get him to do with.
Yeah, I've got a project that's literally it's it's done. But I've been so busy, I can't even find time to run a Kickstarter for it.
Well, tease us. What is it?
It's called Rycroft.
Ooh.
And it's a cemetery crawl for old school essentials. And it's not full of undead.
Interesting.
There are some undead, but that's not the thing. If you find a skeleton in there, it's just a skeleton generally. It's more about what goes on beneath.
All right. Well, there's a good teaser. Let me know whenever that Kickstarter eventually comes in. You'll have to get to it eventually now.
Yeah. I did make an approach to somebody very recently to say, I'm really struggling for finding time to actually run this Kickstarter. Are you interested in managing it and running it and as a publisher? But they got too much on. They've got too many of their own things going on. So I'm still not quite sure what I'm going to do about it. But if there's anybody out there that's got a track record in running Kickstarters and publishing, and you're interested in knowing a bit more, then yeah, feel free to contact me. And then another thing I've got is a totally new rule system, which I've been developing. Seems like years.
It's
not OSR.
Everybody's got their own thing. So you say it's not OSR. So is there a what I really like about talking with folks from the UK or from other parts of the world is you see that a lot of the times their first role-playing game wasn't the same as my first role-playing game. So that when they decide to start making their own passion project, they lean back towards their roots. Is that kind of the case with you, or is this a completely unique thing that is just?
I think it's unique. Well, as unique as a role-playing game is. My first ever game was it was Redbox, Beck Me. So, but also it was Warhammer First Edition, and it was RuneQuest, back in the day. So all of those things are kind of my foundation. But this, I've tried to design rule systems because there's enough OSR systems out there. Nobody needs me to come along and create another OSR system.
My bookshelf is already leaning a little bit with the amount of copies of BX I have with different covers on them, and I can't stop buying them. It's a weird compulsion, but
yeah. I mean, that's a reason to maybe do one because people just keep buying them. It seems like they can't get enough. But yeah, it's like everybody wants to find out what everybody else's house rules are and pay a premium for it. But no, I kind of wanted to create something different. Mainly to support multi-genre stuff. So if you created a character in a fantasy setting using these rules, you could take that character through a portal into a totally different technology world, and it still uses the same rules.
Like a GURPS type universal system that.
Yeah, I've never actually read GURPS, so I don't know how it works and kind of how it handles the challenges that multi-genre creates. But I wanted it to be pretty light as well. I didn't want it to be like a GURPS 700 complicated books maybe. So yeah, it's we'll see how it pans out. But the rules look pretty good at the moment. It's kind of in play testing. Sorry, a fire engine's just gone straight past my window, if you heard that. So yeah, I'm quite keen to finish developing the basically will be rules and setting together, and the first one's a fantasy setting, and then every time I release a new setting or technology world, it'll come with the rules as well. So you can just buy one book and play that one, or if you buy the other book, you're only really interested in the setting part.
Well, if you
So
ever
that's the plan.
if you ever decide that you're going to do like if you're going to put up videos on YouTube or something where you're going to be playing through a play test of it, let me know. I'd love to jump in and try that out. It sounds like it'd be really neat.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's something that I've got some play testing kind of planned in. We've got some character gen. Character gen's really easy. So yeah, that's with a face-to-face group. So we'll see how that goes. But I've had somebody help with some development work on it, and they've done some play testing as well. And that was more from a confidence point of view. I wasn't sure whether the rules were like not so much good enough, just kind of, what's that word, where elegant. I wasn't sure whether the rules were elegant enough. So I've a guy who was an ex-project manager at Modifius, and he does rule design stuff, freelance now as a career. I've had him go through it, and he said, actually, this works really well. So we've kind of just refined it, and I've kind of been building on top of that foundation now. So it gave me the confidence to say, actually, yeah, these rules are worth pursuing. Finally, I've got a rule system that works. So yeah, so I'm really interested to get that developed out and get a product out there, see what people think. But yeah, so if I run any playtesting, I'll let you know.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there could be a bunch of really cool projects, and people can follow that all off the website. And do you do like a newsletter, or are you on any of the social medias or anything like that? If people want to get notified, like right when one of these things kick off.
Yeah. So normally, if I've got a new product, or I'm running a Kickstarter, I'll blast it out everywhere. So Twitter, Facebook. There is a newsletter you can subscribe to on the website, so it'll go out through there. Yeah, pretty much. You can follow me on Kickstarter as well. So yeah, the more places you follow me, the more chance there is to actually catch an announcement, because if you just follow me in one place, algorithms, you're likely to miss it. So yeah, try and follow me in multiple places to make sure you get notified.
Sounds good. I will include down in the description for the podcast, and whenever it gets up onto YouTube as well, all the links for all the places, and people should go in and follow and get excited for some of these really cool things that are coming out. But thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for coming on to chat with me. It was a lot of fun. It's neat hearing, how you managed to transition, make that leap into following something that was a passion, and it's awesome when you can see it actually have worked out really well for somebody, and happy for all the success, and I can't wait to see the success that comes in the future.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, it's been a really good journey, and thanks ever so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. All right, I'm going to pass this up to Future Me, and we'll go from there. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you were eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links for all the ways to find me, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you very so much for listening, and remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe, have fun. We'll talk again soon. Take care.